Hey guys, it's Mr. Schmidt here, and in this video I want to talk about the money multiplier. So if you remember back in Unit 13, we talked about the spending multiplier and how when the government spends money, right, that money goes in the hands of consumers and then they spend it on something, and the person who receives that money then spends it on something, and so on. And there's this multiplier effect. Well, the same thing happens with taxes, as we know, and the same thing happens with loans, right? So, for example, if Bob deposits $1,000 and the reserve requirement is 10%, we know that $100 of that has to stay in the bank in required reserves, but then that other 900 can be loaned out. And so let's say that $900 gets loaned out to Linda, right? And so then Linda deposits it in her bank, and that bank has to hold 10% of that in reserve, so they have to hold on to 90, and they can loan out the rest, $810. And so you can see there's this multiplier effect that's going to continue to happen as money continues to be lent out and gets added to the economy, right? This money got injected into the economy, and this money got injected into the economy, and we could do it again where, what would that be, $81 gets put into, or has to stay in reserve requirement in John's bank, and then John's bank can loan out the rest of that money. That is the idea of the money multiplier. It's the idea that the money supply is going to increase the more banks loan out money by some multiple factor, right? Some multiplied factor. Because every time a bank loans out money, that money goes to someone who can then put it in their bank, and then that money can get loaned out, and so on and so forth, right? Now, we're assuming that when someone borrows the money, they're depositing it to spend it later. So a person may not deposit all of the money that they're borrowing, right? So that's where some money can leak out and you don't get that full multiplier effect. But assuming that each of these borrowers deposit all of the money, that's a huge potential multiplier effect. And in terms of how we calculate that multiplier, in terms of what's the total expansion of the money supply or contraction if banks stop loaning out money, this is called the money multiplier, okay? And here is how it works. What you're going to do is you're going to take 1 over whatever your reserve requirement is as a fraction, okay? So for example, if the reserve requirement's 10%, to get your multiplier, 1 over 10, and that equals 10. So basically, it's just the reciprocal of the reserve requirement as a fraction, which, hey, we've done that before. That's just how we found the spending multiplier, except instead of using the reserve requirement, we were using the marginal propensity to save. So it's the same process here, but instead of total GDP getting multiplied, it's the money supply that's getting multiplied, right? So an application of this could be, okay, an initial deposit of $100, right? Now, not all of that's going to get multiplied because if the reserve requirement is 10%, only $90 of that actually is going to go into the wild. It gets multiplied by 10, and the money supply at maximum could increase by $900. Okay, let me go back through that one more time so you didn't get lost there. If we're assuming someone deposits $100, okay, the reserve requirement is 10%, okay, so we turn that into a fraction of 1 over 10. The bank has to keep 10% of that in reserve, right? So they're going to hold on to $10, can't loan that out, and they're going to loan out 90. We calculate the multiplier to be 10. The fraction, 1/10, flip it, 10. So the $90 is what's going to get multiplied. an amount of money that doesn't get to go into the economy can't be multiplied. This $10 can't be multiplied because it has to stay in the bank. So what actually is getting loaned out is what can be multiplied, and it's times 10 in this case, because that's what we found the multiplier to be, knowing the reserve requirement's 10%, 90 times 10, we're saying the maximum change in the money supply is $900. So the money supply at maximum could increase by $900 if every single person does exactly what the first person did. Deposit the whole thing, the bank loans out everything they possibly can. Because remember, the bank doesn't have to loan out that $90, right? They could only loan out 60 of it or 70 of it. They don't have to loan out all of it. We're just assuming that they're going to loan out all of it and hold on to nothing. Okay? So just like with the spending multiplier, I would practice just calculating the money multiplier. Be like, okay, if the reserve requirement was 20%, what would the multiplier be? Well, it'd be 1 over 2 over 10, so that's 10 over 2, that's 5. So the multiplier would be 5. So what's interesting here is that as we increase the reserve requirement, notice here that the multiplier shrinks, right? And that kind of makes sense because if the reserve requirement is higher, banks have to hold on to more money, and that's less money that can get multiplied and increase the money supply by a higher factor. So that's all for this video on the money multiplier. Until next time, have a great day.